Ilara stood before the mirror, her fingers tracing the curves of her face. The reflection staring back at her was that of a beautiful girl with flawless skin, almond-shaped eyes that sparkled like the night sky, and lips that curved into a perfect smile. Yet, as she stared at her reflection, she knew this was not the face she wanted the world to see. With a sigh, she reached for the small jar on her dresser, unscrewing the lid to reveal a thick, dark paste. She smeared it across her cheeks, dulling the natural glow of her skin. Next, she pulled on a tattered, oversized hoodie that concealed her figure and hid her hair beneath a knit cap. By the time she was done, the girl in the mirror looked nothing like the stunning beauty she truly was. "Ilara, breakfast is ready," her mother called from downstairs. Ilara took one last look at her transformed self and smiled with satisfaction. This was the face she needed to show the world. Not the one of a girl who could turn heads, but of a girl who could blend into the background, unnoticed and unremarkable. "Coming, Mom," she replied, grabbing her backpack and heading downstairs. As she entered the kitchen, her mother, Grace, turned to her with a warm smile. "Good morning, sweetheart." "Morning," Ilara mumbled, keeping her head down. Grace frowned slightly but said nothing, used to her daughter's withdrawn demeanor. Ilara had been this way ever since her father passed away 3 years ago. Grace knew that Ilara had changed since that day, retreating into herself, but she never questioned it, assuming it was just her way of coping with grief. Ilara ate her breakfast quickly, eager to leave the house before her mother could start probing questions about school or friends, subjects she had little interest in discussing. She waved a quick goodbye and hurried out the door, the chilly morning air nipping at her skin. School was a necessary evil, a place where Ilara could maintain her facade. As she walked through the crowded halls, she kept her head down, avoiding eye contact with anyone who might look her way. She had perfected the art of invisibility over the years, and it was working well. No one paid her any attention, and that was exactly what she wanted. But today, something felt different. As she turned the corner toward her locker, she collided with someone, dropping her books to the floor. "Sorry, I wasn't looking where I was going," a voice said, bending down to help her pick up her things. Ilara looked up to see a boy with messy brown hair and kind eyes. He handed her a book with a smile, and for a moment, she felt her heart skip a beat. But she quickly pushed the feeling aside, mumbling a quick thank you before turning away. "I'm new here," the boy continued, undeterred by her cold response. "My name's Leo." "Ilara," she said quietly, keeping her eyes on the ground. "Nice to meet you, Ilara. Maybe I'll see you around." She nodded, not trusting herself to say anything else. As he walked away, she could feel his eyes lingering on her for just a moment longer than necessary. For the rest of the day, Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Every time she glanced over her shoulder, she caught Leo's gaze. It made her nervous, but also strangely curious. Why was he so interested in her? She wasn't special, at least, not the version of herself she let the world see. Days turned into weeks, and despite her efforts to remain invisible, Leo seemed determined to get to know her. He'd sit next to her in class, strike up conversations, and even wait for her after school to walk her home. At first, Ilara was wary, suspicious of his intentions. But as time passed, she found herself slowly lowering her guard. One afternoon, as they walked home together, Leo turned to her with a serious expression. "Ilara, can I ask you something?" "Sure," she replied, bracing herself for whatever question was coming. "Why do you hide?" The question hit her like a punch to the gut. She stopped in her tracks, her heart racing. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you're always hiding under that hoodie, avoiding people. But I see glimpses of something more, something beautiful." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Ilara felt panic rising in her chest. She had worked so hard to keep people at arm's length, to protect herself from the shallow judgments of the world. But here was Leo, seeing through her defenses, making her feel vulnerable in a way she hadn't felt in years. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, turning away from him. Leo gently took her hand, stopping her from leaving. "You don't have to pretend with me, Ilara. I like you for who you are, not for who you pretend to be." His words were like a balm to her soul, soothing the wounds she had carried for so long. She wanted to believe him, to trust that he meant what he said. But a part of her was still scared, terrified of being hurt. "I'm sorry," she whispered, pulling her hand away. "I can't do this." With that, she turned and ran, leaving Leo standing alone on the sidewalk. As she hurried home, tears streamed down her face, blurring her vision. She didn't know why she was crying. Was it out of fear? Or was it because, for the first time in a long time, someone had seen her, the real her, and still cared? Ilara's mind was in turmoil. She spent the next few days avoiding Leo, skipping classes, and hiding in the library. She couldn't face him, not after what he had said. She wasn't ready to let someone in, to allow them to see past the facade she had carefully constructed. But Leo wasn't the only one who had noticed her change. Her mother, Grace, began to worry as well. One evening, as they sat down for dinner, Grace decided to confront her daughter. "Ilara, is everything okay? You've been acting strange lately," she asked, concern lacing her voice. Ilara shook her head, not wanting to burden her mother with her problems. "I'm fine, Mom. Just a lot of schoolwork, that's all." Grace didn't look convinced, but she didn't press further. Instead, she reached across the table and took Ilara's hand. "You know you can talk to me, right? About anything." Ilara nodded, forcing a smile. "I know, Mom. Thanks." Later that night, as Ilara lay in bed, her thoughts drifted back to Leo. She missed him. She missed the way he made her feel seen and cared for. But the fear of rejection, of being exposed, still held her back. The next day, Ilara found herself standing outside the school library, hesitating to go inside. She had seen Leo disappear behind the library doors earlier, and part of her wanted to talk to him, to explain why she had run away. But another part of her was still scared. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. The library was quiet, the shelves towering over her like silent sentinels. She spotted Leo sitting at a table in the corner, his head buried in a book. Gathering her courage, she walked over to him. "Leo." He looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "Ilara." "Hi. Can we talk?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, closing his book and gesturing for her to sit down. "I'm sorry for running away," she began, her hands trembling slightly. "It's just, I've been through a lot, and I'm not used to people seeing the real me." Leo reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "It's okay, Ilara. I don't want to push you. I just want you to know that you don't have to hide from me. I care about you, no matter what." His words were like a lifeline, pulling her out of the darkness she had been drowning in for so long. For the first time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could trust someone with her true self. "Thank you," she whispered, squeezing his hand. "Thank you for not giving up on me." As they sat there, holding hands, Ilara realized that she had found something she had been searching for all along, someone who saw beyond the surface, someone who cared about the person she was inside. But as comforting as that realization was, it also terrified her. Because with that trust came the risk of being hurt, of being betrayed. And Ilara wasn't sure if she was ready to face that fear. Days passed, and Ilara found herself growing closer to Leo. They spent more time together, talking about their dreams, their fears, and everything in between. Slowly, Ilara began to let down her walls, revealing parts of herself that she had kept hidden for so long. But as she grew closer to Leo, her fear of losing him grew as well. "What?